Hello everyone. Today I want to talk to you guys about why axes were so popular in the Dark Age. Why axes, why not swords? And a lot of times we'll see artwork depicting a war axe like this or a battle axe with one of these round shields, right? So the shield is basically protecting my hand and I'm striking around the shield. Okay, so a lot of times when we think of these round shields, we think of them as Viking shields. However, this is the weapon set that was that was commonly used throughout all of Europe. The reason why we tend to think of this as a Viking shield is because Vikings were buried with their weapons. Okay, so when we dig up graves of Vikings, we find this stuff, and that's why we associate it with Vikings. I mean, Christians in other parts of Europe were using the same thing, but they weren't buried with their weapons. So that's the only reason why we don't have that type of an association. Okay, so in the Dark Age, which is from about 500 AD to 1000 AD, this is a very popular weapon set. Okay, so when we say Dark Age, why do we call it a Dark Age? It's basically after the fall of the Roman Empire in the West. Okay, it still continued in the East, in Byzantium, but that's the reason why we refer to it as Dark Age. And during that time period, we don't have a whole bunch of literature, so it's basically a Dark Age in terms of very little information that is now available to us because of the drop in literacy, basically. Okay, so that's from like around 500 AD to 1000 AD, and during that time period, axes with shields were very popular. Now, the question becomes, why did swords drop out of favor, right? Because the Romans used them, the Greeks used them, so it's not like they didn't understand this concept. And some swords did exist during that time period. We had found them in the burials of Vikings, but they're definitely not as long as this. They're probably about as long as this axe over here, maybe a little bit longer. The general idea has been that, hey, during that time period, there was people had forgotten how to make swords. Okay, so I think there's a little bit more to it, and basically I forged this axe, meaning I blacksmithed it, and I've only been doing this for about a week. Okay, so well, including setting up the forge, 2 weeks. So it took me 2 weeks to get to the point where I could make a battle axe, okay, out of scrap metal, okay, out of whatever metal I happened to have available, okay. And I did a whole video on how I put this together. I did a video where I'm testing this, okay. I'm striking against steel, I'm chopping wood with this, and it's working great. Now, one of the interesting things about this, even though I quenched the blade, right, meaning that I got this red hot and put it in water, which is supposed to harden it, and then I heated it up again to a bluish color, and I let it air cool, so that's supposed to temper it. So when I did the hardness test, right, basically what you do is you take a file like this and you rub it against the edge over here. It's not supposed to bite, okay, because I can see that it's scratching it, it's taking off material. So even though I hardened this and tempered this, okay, it actually did not harden and it did not temper, and it really doesn't matter, okay, because there's enough mass in this metal that I can hit this barrel all day, man, and this thing's gonna work just fine. Okay, this thing is not gonna break. It's not gonna, I mean, it's just the metal is very concentrated in the head, and like I said, I was chopping wood. It is any bladesmith, anybody that makes swords will tell you that if you chop at a tree with a sword, you're gonna destroy the sword. Right? Even like the highest quality sword, made by the finest blacksmith, if you go chopping at a tree with it, which has no give, you're going to destroy the sword. Okay, so there's no question that the axes are a lot tougher. Okay, the sword is a weapon of speed. Okay, in order for this to work, you gotta put a lot of speed behind that blade. The axe is a mass weapon, so it's not going to move as fast, but it has more mass at the end, so that it can make a really hard hit. And because the metal is so much thicker, it really doesn't matter if it's tempered and hardened. And I did a little research on this, like with pole arms, like where they in fact hardened and tempered, and like for example with bardishes, which is a pole arm that has a very large curved axe blade on it. We have a lot of information on that because those are like 17th century weapons, so we know how they were making them. And those were generally not hardened and tempered because it doesn't matter. It didn't matter. It's an axe. You got enough mass there that it's still going to work. It's still going to do the job. So here's the thing. As I said earlier, I did attempt to harden and temper this axe head, and it apparently, it didn't work out. Why would that not work out? Why is it that when I take a file to this, it's the file is still grabbing instead of like slipping off? Probably the metal, right? This is usually in order to harden and temper something, you need a high carbon steel. Okay. So there is different qualities of steel out there. So in the in the later Renaissance period, basically post 1100 AD, their metallurgy has gotten better, and the blacksmiths have a better concept, I think, of what metals they are working with. Okay, versus what I think is going on in the during the Dark Ages. They're pretty much like pulling together whatever scrap metals they can find, right? That a lot of it recycled from the earlier Roman era, right? So they're pulling together whatever scrap metal they can find, and they're building axes, okay? And the hardening and the tempering is not working out very well because it's not the perfect type of steel for hardening and tempering, right? But again, with the axe, it doesn't matter. Whether it's a hand axe or whether it's a 4-foot axe like a Dane axe, it doesn't matter. There's simply enough mass in the head that it will still work. It's still not going to break, etc. Okay, so that's not the case with the sword. So, for example, I got here some mild steel, right? Which when you look at these two, like, can this steel become this? Okay, and I mean, just with the having done 2 forging projects so far, I can tell you guys 100%, right? I mean, I can take this metal and make it look like this, okay? Including the fuller, right? Because there's a fuller in here. This area over here is kind of carved out. It's kind of like an I-bar, right? Or an I-beam to reduce the weight. Well, I could do the same thing with this, right? I could basically hammer down the center over here to push material to the side, to basically make the material thinner down the middle and push more material towards the edge. So I can give this exactly the same shape as this. I can make the cross guard. I can make the a wooden grip that's going to slide in there, and then I can put a pommel over here and pin it over, and that's going to hold everything together. Okay, so I can absolutely turn this into this. However, what I will not be able to do with this is harden it and temper it like this one has been done, right? Because this was actually made by a bladesmith that started off with the right type of steel that he could easily harden and harden and temper, and different steels will harden and temper at different temperatures, right? And usually the bladesmith can tell by the color of the metal. Nowadays, I'm sure they probably have a thermometer in there, so that they get it to that, once they figure out what that temperature is supposed to be, they've got a thermometer where they can get an exact reading, and they will get it up to that exact temperature for a consistent hardening and tempering every single time. Okay, so that's the commercial swords that you buy. I'm not talking about the cheap $30 Amazon ones. I'm talking about like at least $300, where the blade basically runs all the way through the handle. Okay, and then basically the pommel holds everything together. So with swords that cost, $400 and up, and have been made by an actual bladesmith with a lot of experience, they know exactly at what temperature to heat it up for hardening, and then afterwards for tempering. And I think they basically put it in an oven for about 2 hours. I think at like 350 degrees. If it's one type of steel, but then it's another type of steel, they'll take it to 400. But that's the reason why I can't take this piece of metal and turn it into a reliable sword. Now, what I could do is I could take this and turn this into a dark age sword that is, probably going to be a little bit shorter, right? Because if I know that the sword is going to be of a lesser quality, because as the sword gets longer, right, it increases the chance of it breaking under stress, right? So if I make a shorter sword, like the Romans and the Greeks had, right, I'm going to get a sword that has a better chance of holding up. And that's why, again, your dark age swords tend to be a bit shorter, and that sword tends to be a backup to your battle axe. Okay, so the axe and shield was your main weapon, and then the sword was basically your backup weapon, which was about the same length as this, maybe just a tad bit longer. The shorter it is, the better chance that it's going to be reliable and not break on you. Okay, so it's one of the things that I've realized over the past 2 weeks working on my blacksmithing projects, of why it's when I see what it took to get to this level here, where I could actually make a reliable axe without too much difficulty, right? There was a little bit of a learning curve. There was a couple of heads that I ended up tossing, but within 3 heads, within 3 attempts, I had a very good, reliable axe head. Okay, it would probably take me many attempts to try and turn this into a good sword. Okay, now one of the things that, if you notice, that stands out with this battle axe here, right? This has langets. Let me give you guys, in case you guys didn't see the earlier video. Okay, the construction of this is, it's got these langets, basically 1/8 steel on each side, that rivets down to the shaft, right? You can see the rivets in there, which I have grinded down. And this is actually a hitting area, right? Because this comes all the way to the edge. So whether you hit with this or whether you hit with this, you're going to do, this is going to hurt. If you hit a steel helmet, like a Norman nasal cap or a Viking cap with this, I mean, this is a very solid hitting area, because the steel comes all the way to the edge, and that's what you're hitting with. Okay, so whether you hit with, and this probably has less of a chance of skipping, whereas with this, I'd want to stick this into leather or into mail, where it has less of a chance of turning over. So this is a primary hitting area. So anyway, the way I was saying, the langets here are riveted onto the shaft, and then the head sits on top, and then this on a poleaxe would be a top spike that kind of comes down, but in this case there's no spike here. This comes down and it basically holds everything together. And the rivets don't just go through the woods, but they actually go through this metal that goes all the way to the top here, right? So this piece here holding it together is not attached to the wood. It's actually going through the steel. Okay, so this is extremely strong, really solid. Like, I don't think I could break this. I could break this, using machines and tools and stuff like that. But by me striking stuff, I do not think I can break this thing. Okay, this is why this would be a primary battle weapon, during the Dark Age period. Okay, so I wanted to share that information with you guys. Stuff that I kind of knew already, right? But having done the blacksmithing project, where I created this, and I saw how, relatively easy it was to build this, right? I mean, not easy, but relatively easy. I was able to get to a point where I could build this and make a very reliable battle axe. Okay, I can understand why during the Dark Age period, where they didn't have access to a lot of information, they didn't have access to materials, right? We're kind of working with whatever scraps they could find. They were able to build a lot of reliable battle axes, but maybe not build a lot of reliable swords. Okay? So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Drop some comments. It helps pushes the algorithm, and I'll talk to you soon.